Hello and welcome to the Faith and Culture Challenging the Narrative. Today, I'm going to challenge you about the meaning of shalom. We all know that there is an innate quest for shalom inside all of us. And the world has so many things to offer as peace. But man's peace, I challenge you, is an illusion. The Bible tells us that Jesus told his disciples, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." That comes from John 14:27. The reason I bring this up is because in a recent small group Bible study, this passage of scripture stood out to me, and I immediately thought about the true meaning of the word peace that Jesus was passing along to his disciples, as opposed to how it is interpreted today. For the past decade, I have used the word shalom as my closing for my electronic communications with others. I have always used the term to wish people God's spirit of wholeness and calm on their lives. However, in my small group, one of the leaders said that in his ministry experience around other Jewish leaders, the word shalom became little more than a greeting to each other. It is interesting how the meanings of words can lose their intended connotations in a culture over time. When it comes to scripture reading, I believe that it is imperative to focus on the words being used. It also helps to have a biblical, Hebrew, or Greek-based lexicon to get the true essence of what was being said by the writers and those who are represented in the Bible. When our leader shared his experience with us, I sat there and thought about the Aaronic blessing found in Numbers, chapter 6. It goes something like this: "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace." Many of you probably already know that and have heard it in music, which is so beautiful. That is what I think of when I say shalom to people. It is a true desire for the other person's well-being. I have not experienced the casual use of this term that has made it lose its meaning, like my friend shared. This brief conversation sparked my interest to better understand what Jesus meant when speaking to his disciples, because we know that his promises extend to all of his followers who would come after the first century disciples. In the first century, how people understood the meaning of peace depended on their culture and background, much like today. This understanding begs the question, is the term relative or absolute? Much like words peace, shalom, will be relative to many, but in God's realm, it is an absolute term that we can count on. The definition for peace found in the Merriam-Webster dictionary is a definition that will satisfy most people. So what is that? So, for most people, peace means a state of tranquility or quiet, such as freedom from civil disturbance, a state of security or order within a community provided for by law or custom. Freedom from being disturbed or bothered by people, noise, etc. Freedom from disquieting or oppressive thoughts or emotions, which many struggle with these days. It should not be surprising that the Roman Empire of the first century also defined peace in much of the same way. This was true especially when it came to the enforcement of peace. This was a rule of law known as Pax Romana. I recently heard a famous talk show host and social media influencer suggest that the United States should learn from the Romans and allow for Pax Romana. I hope that he is not serious and is only ignorant of what this meant in the Roman Empire. The Romans were cruel and feared by their citizens and by those who worked for the government under the watchful eye of the emperor. The peace that they used was might. And if that peace was breached in any way by the disturbance, was punishable by death in many cases. This is why Pilate was trying to appease the Jews in Matthew 27, for fear that a riot would look bad on him. It is also the reason why the Jewish leaders were perpetually inciting riots and violence surrounding Paul, to get the attention of the Roman authorities, to silence him. Pax Romana was the use of force to bring about their version of peace. That is not true peace. It's a form of oppression of the people. How does a culture change to make things better for people if those being oppressed have no way to push back, even with their voice? Those in control will inevitably silence any opposition in the name of keeping the peace. Roman rule was a culture run by a few aristocrats who lorded over the rest of the population, who were poor and represented the larger portion of the inhabitants. Centurions were ever present to enforce Roman peace for this very reason. Another political ideology that uses the same type of tactics to keep their citizens in line is Islamic rule and the use of Sharia law. If anyone steps out and rebels against their overlords, they are quickly and permanently silenced in many cases. You might be thinking this also happens in communist countries, and you would be correct. Forced peace is not true peace, and it is nowhere near the shalom that we all seek. Although Islamic rule exercises Sharia law that is based on a theocratic political ideology, it stands in stark contrast to the Judeo-Christian faith. Living under the Judeo-Christian God and his rulership is completely the opposite from the ways of humankind. This is why understanding the character and nature of God is so important to comprehend. Shalom has a much deeper meaning than the humanist's limited understanding. Shalom is a gift that only God can provide. It is a gift freely given to those who accept God's Messiah. This is not because the God of the Bible is withholding anything from people, but because people resist his way of life. According to Strong's Hebrew Concordance, the Jews of the first century and earlier would have understood this peace to mean that God would bless the people with prosperity, that is, intact state of favorable circumstance, that they would enjoy a life of completeness, that is, the state of a totality of a collection. They were promised that under his care, they would be granted safeness and salvation, that is, a state of being free from danger. God would grant his people supernatural health, that is, a state of lack of disease and a life of wholeness or well-being. You see, Yahweh's people were promised a life of satisfaction and contentment. That is, a state of having one's basic needs or more met, and so being content here on this earth. These promises stand in stark contrast to the way that mankind brings about their perverted version of peace. These are gifts from the God of the universe that are offered to those who love him and live in obedience to him. This was the shalom that was offered to the nation of Israel. Unfortunately, they chose the ways of the world and lacked the trust in Yah that was required to receive the shalom. This is a shalom that offers true freedom in peace. It is not coerced or controlled by dependence on another human being. It is, however, conditional on our part as individuals. Nonetheless, Yahweh's offer is always on the table. Fortunately, the prophet Isaiah foretold of God sending a Prince of Peace, Shalom, that would offer the shalom that we all innately seek. This promise came as God in the flesh, in Jesus of Nazareth. The secular world seeks a utopia that can only be achieved by a heavy-handed totalitarian regime. Even though it may not start out that way, the entry point is usually socialism. It's amazing that the masses do not see this when they chase after the promises of peace that man offers over the invitation given to humanity by Jesus. Every human alive seeks after a freedom and a liberty that humanity was intended to have as the Imago Dei. But it was taken away from us by the enemy, Satan, when Eve and then Adam doubted their Creator. The enemy does not want humanity to find or keep the shalom that we were intended to have from the very beginning of time. That is why he has worked overtime since we were created to divert our attention and distort truth, to mislead everyone alive. The devil's goal is to convince humanity that they can take control of their own lives without God. For those who have awakened to God's truth, however, they are those who understand from Scripture that we were meant for so much more. In spite of the enemy's efforts, those who know God will also realize that his Son, Jesus, overcame the world and its ruler. That means that those who accept God's leadership in their lives have also been given the authority to take back territory from the enemy and bring God's kingdom to this earth. We have the authority to override the schemes of the devil. But this can only happen if we are aware of the spiritual war that rages all around us. This is not our home, and God's people march to a different beat. We plant ourselves at the feet of Jesus because we know that only God offers true freedom in peace, not a coerced form of peace. It is a shalom that is given freely to those who choose God's way over the ways of the defeated ruler of this world. We have been given the authority to take back ground and to teach others to do the same. Each one of us have been given a task to do and the gifts that will help us complete those tasks. The Creator of the universe invites everyone to find that shalom, the shalom we were originally designed for as we seek His face and trust. The true meaning of shalom is not relative, and it is not simply a salutation or a casual pleasantry as we pass someone on the streets. It is a gift offered by our Creator as we enter into this covenant of true peace and obedience to His word. Jesus asked all of His disciples to make disciples of all those that God places in their path. This includes His disciples in the 21st century and beyond. We should desire for others to come and enter into His rest, just as those who accepted His invitation already. Check out my Substack for any resources that I used and scripture verses. If you got something out of this, please subscribe and give me a like, a thumbs up. It will really help the algorithms so that this program can reach so many more people. Thank you, and I can't wait to see you next time.